Racist boss humiliates black worker, but learns the difference between racism and prejudice the hard way. He thought it was just another morning at work, but within minutes his dignity was stripped away in front of everyone. The cruel words weren't just prejudice. They were something far deeper, far more dangerous. A black worker humiliated by the man meant to lead him. Yet what no one in that office knew was that the tables were about to turn. Because hidden behind the silence was a truth powerful enough to change everything. And when it finally came out, the difference between prejudice and racism would be revealed in the most brutal way. It started like any other day in the office. He arrived early, as always, coffee in hand, determined to prove himself through hard work. For months he had stayed late, fixing errors, carrying projects others had abandoned. He was quiet, respectful, and driven, never the type to draw attention. To his co-workers, he was reliable. To his family, he was hope for a better future. But in the eyes of his boss, none of it mattered. Behind the polished desk and forced smiles, a different kind of judgment was waiting. A judgment not about his work, but about the color of his skin. And soon that judgment would erupt in a way no one in the office could ignore. At first, the comments were small, little barbs disguised as jokes. A misplaced file became his fault even when he had never touched it. A project completed ahead of schedule was credited to someone else, while his name was erased. The boss always made sure it happened in public, where others could hear. Laughter followed, uneasy but present, and with each insult, his shoulders grew heavier. But soon the cruelty escalated. Meetings became stages for humiliation. If he spoke, his words were mocked. If he stayed silent, he was called lazy. No move was the right one, because the rules weren't about work. They were about reminding him where the boss thought he belonged. It wasn't just prejudice anymore. Prejudice assumes. This was power used as a weapon. This was racism, sharp and deliberate. And the office watched, silent. Whispers grew. Some wondered how much more he would take. Others feared they'd be next if they spoke up. Yet the man himself stayed quiet. Not because he didn't feel the sting, but because he was waiting. Waiting for the right moment. The one chance that would turn silence into thunder. And that moment was closer than anyone realized. The office was silent, every eye locked, on the scene unfolding. The boss stood tall, smirking, convinced he had broken his target once again. But then the worker rose slowly from his chair. His silence was no longer weakness. It was weight, heavy enough to make the room tense. He walked to the center of the room, a folder in hand. His voice was calm, but the authority in it shook the walls. You think you own this place. But you don't. Not anymore. Gasps cut through the air as he laid the documents on the table. Shareholder agreements. Ownership papers. Proof undeniable. The smirk drained from the boss's face. His hands trembled as whispers erupted around him. The man he had mocked, the man he had ridiculed, was the true owner of the company. The humiliation that once crushed one man now turned, crashing down on the very person who had inflicted it. For the first time, the office saw who truly held the power, and in that moment, justice wasn't a dream. It was standing right in front of them. The office never looked the same after that day. The workers who once stayed silent now carried themselves differently, knowing the truth of who had been standing among them. The boss who thrived on humiliation walked out in shame, stripped of his false authority. But for the man at the center of it all, it was never about revenge. It was about dignity, about proving that no matter how deep prejudice runs, truth can still rise higher. And yet this was only one victory in one building. Across the world, countless others still face voices that try to silence, hands that try to push them down, and systems that disguise prejudice as power. This story isn't just about a worker and his boss. It's about all of us. About the difference between prejudice and racism and the weight of silence when people choose not to act. So I'll leave you with this. If dignity can be restored in one office, why can't it be restored everywhere? And if one voice can turn humiliation into justice, what could happen if all of us refuse to stay silent? If you believe in justice, subscribe and like.